Congratulations, Mr. Blackwood.
The HOA president smirked, waving her clipboard.
Your private island will finally serve the community instead of one selfish hermit.
Bulldozers hit at dawn. 38 luxury cabins planned, $350K each. They claimed some vague watershed clause from old lake papers gave them rights over my 1923 deeded land. Lawyers called it shaky. I stayed silent. Every morning, in boxers with hot coffee, I watched century-old pines crash. Chainsaws howled through the mist. Diesel smoke stung my eyes. She called me selfish. The crew laughed like victors. Neighbors said fight. Sheriff, civil matter. Most would have exploded on day one. I didn't. The best revenge is patient. Let them build deeper into their mistake. Cabins rose fast. Buyers lined up. Grand opening set. Then the court date arrived. The judge opened the original 1923 deed and began reading aloud. What happened next? You have to see it. What would you do? Fight immediately or wait for the perfect moment? Comment below and drop your location today. My name's Ezra Blackwood, and that island belonged to my family when Al Capone was still running Chicago. Grandfather Silas bought 47 acres of pristine wilderness in 1923 for what a decent used car costs today. Smart old bastard knew waterfront would be gold someday. He just never mentioned the pirates who'd try stealing it. I inherited Eagle's Rest 5 years ago after 2 decades building bridges for Uncle Sam. Marine Corps engineering, spent my career constructing things in places where people actively tried to blow them up. Figured I'd earned some peace and quiet on this lake up in Millbrook County. The cabin's pure 1920s charm, cedar logs chinked with grandfather's own hands, stone fireplace that could heat a small town, solar panels I installed myself because nobody builds off-grid better than a marine engineer. The well water tastes like liquid heaven, sweet and mineral-rich from artesian springs grandfather found by pure luck. Morning coffee on that dock, listening to loons call across the mist while watching sunrise paint the water gold. Brother, that's what freedom sounds like. But paradise has a way of attracting snakes in designer clothing. Meet Darlene Pritchard, 58, blonde hair shellacked into submission, drives a white Escalade that guzzles more gas than my grandfather's fishing boat. She's president of Lakeside Estates HOA, the McMansion development sprawling across the mainland shore like a rash. Think cookie-cutter palaces with 3-car garages and lawns so artificially perfect they make AstroTurf look natural. She showed up at my dock on a Tuesday morning without invitation, clipboard clutched like a holy sword, perfume thick enough to choke a moose. Didn't even pretend to be friendly, just launched into her script like I was already convicted. Mr. Blackwood, I'm here about your numerous property violations. The smell of her department store perfume clashed with cedar shavings from grandfather's workshop. I was barefoot, wearing yesterday's flannel, probably looked exactly like the hillbilly problem she expected to steamroll. What violations? I asked, genuinely amused. She clicked her gold pen like cocking a pistol. Your dock violates architectural standards, your cabin's an eyesore, and these solar panels, she gestured dismissively, completely destroy our community's aesthetic harmony. Now here's where any sane person would have laughed her back to shore. My island sits 200 yards from her precious development, never been part of any HOA, never signed any covenants, never even met these people before today. But something in her tone, that entitled certainty that she could just take whatever she wanted, made me curious instead of angry. How much? I asked. $15,000 in architectural review fees. Monthly dues going forward. We're being generous with the payment plan considering. I nearly spit coffee across the lake. Lady, you realize this is private property? Been in my family since... We'll see about that, sweetie. She pivoted on her designer heels with military precision. 30 days to comply. Don't make this harder than necessary. Her speedboat's wake rocked my dock as she disappeared, leaving me holding grandfather's deed and wondering if I'd just hallucinated the entire conversation. Spoiler alert, I hadn't. 48 hours later, County Inspector Pete showed up looking nervous as a cat in a doghouse. My dock, which passed Coast Guard inspection 6 months prior, suddenly needed immediate safety remediation. My septic system required emergency replacement for 25 grand. Permits for solar panels mysteriously expired overnight. Sorry, Mr. Blackwood, Pete mumbled while scribbling citations. Orders from Commissioner Hollister. Everything's got to be by the book now. Wade Hollister. I filed that name in my mental enemies list. By week's end, my mail stopped coming. Address verification issues. Internet died. Commercial use violations. Propane delivery refused. Liability concerns. That evening, watching sunset over water that now tasted faintly of diesel from increased boat traffic, I realized this wasn't bureaucratic incompetence. This was coordinated warfare with a simple goal: make island life so miserable I'd sell cheap and disappear. The loons still called across darkening water, but their voices carried a different message now. They sounded like they were laughing. Darlene didn't waste time playing games. Within 72 hours, she'd weaponized the entire county bureaucracy against me like some kind of administrative Navy SEAL. First shot fired, commercial zoning complaint. Apparently, letting my buddy Jake bring his kids fishing twice a year made me a commercial fishing operation. Never mind that I'd never charged anyone a dime, Darlene's complaint cited pattern of business activity requiring proper licensing and taxation. The county moved faster than I'd ever seen government move. Must be nice having friends in high places. Commissioner Wade Hollister, turns out he's Darlene's tennis partner and fellow country club member, called an emergency zoning review. My residential property suddenly needed commercial permits, environmental impact studies, and about 47 different inspections. Know what commercial permits cost for waterfront property? Try $50,000, just for the paperwork. Back in Iraq, we used to joke about military procurement costs, but this bureaucratic shakedown made Pentagon spending look reasonable. But here's where it gets really cute. Every permit I needed required approval from... guess who? The Lakeside Estates HOA, Environmental Committee. You know, to protect the lake's community character. It's like asking a fox to approve your henhouse security system. The squeeze got tighter daily. Mail delivery officially stopped. Apparently my address doesn't exist in the postal system anymore. Internet service terminated for violation of residential use agreements. My propane supplier suddenly discovered liability issues with island deliveries. Even the local marina refused to sell me fuel. "Sorry, Ezra," said Tommy, the dock manager who'd known my grandfather. "New insurance policy. Can't service properties under dispute." The sound of bureaucratic doors slamming echoed louder than gunshots across the water. But every good Marine knows that when the enemy starts coordinating attacks, they're also revealing their command structure. Time for reconnaissance. I drove to the courthouse. Yes, I keep an old pickup on the mainland for supply runs, and spent 8 hours digging through public records. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while dust motes danced in afternoon sunbeams streaming through tall windows. Thank God for Mavis Smith, the courthouse clerk who's been filing papers since Carter was president. "You looking into the Pritchard situation?" she asked quietly, glancing around the empty records room. "Should I be?" Mavis pulled out a thick folder marked Confidential Property Disputes. The musty smell of old filing cabinets mixed with the scent of coffee brewing in her corner office. "Honey, you're the 4th waterfront owner this year asking these same questions, and you won't be the last." The pattern emerged clear as lake water. Over 18 months, 7 lakefront properties had faced identical harassment campaigns, anonymous complaints, expedited permit reviews, sudden zoning violations, utility shutoffs, all following the same playbook. 6 of those 7 owners sold within 90 days. All sales went to the same buyer, Pristine Waters, LLC. "Who owns Pristine Waters?" I asked, though my gut already knew. Mavis slid the corporate filing across the table. Bradford Pritchard, managing partner, Darlene's husband. Suddenly, everything clicked like rifle parts snapping together. This wasn't random HOA power tripping. This was systematic land theft disguised as community improvement. I remembered reading about organized crime cases back in my military intelligence days. They called it racketeering when criminals used threats and intimidation to acquire property. The feds loved prosecuting those cases because they could go after the entire organization, not just individual crimes. The pieces formed a beautiful, terrible picture. Darlene harasses waterfront owners with bureaucratic warfare until they crack and sell cheap. Bradford's company swoops in with below-market offers. Properties get developed and flipped for massive profits. Brilliant system, completely legal on the surface, absolutely ruthless underneath. But here's what they didn't know about this particular target. Marines don't retreat. We adapt, improvise, and overcome. That evening, back on my island with grandfather's deed spread across the kitchen table, I made 2 phone calls. First, to attorney Miranda Cross, environmental law specialist with a reputation for eating corporations alive. Second, to private investigator Cole Santos, who specialized in white-collar crime. Miranda's retainer was steep, but she worked on contingency for the right cases. Mr. Blackwood, if what you're describing is accurate, we're looking at potential federal violations. When harassment follows the same pattern across multiple properties, individual crimes become something much bigger. She explained how pattern evidence worked. Document everything, because what looks like separate incidents can become proof of organized conspiracy. Smart woman. I could already tell this was going to cost the Pritchards more than money. Cole's investigation would take weeks, but his preliminary research was encouraging. These shell company networks leave digital footprints everywhere. If they've done this before, I'll find the money trail. As autumn settled over Eagle's Rest Lake, I developed my strategy. Instead of fighting each bureaucratic battle individually, I'd let them continue their campaign while building a comprehensive case for federal prosecution. The smell of wood smoke from my fireplace mixed with the crisp scent of dying leaves as I watched lights twinkle across the lake from Darlene's development. She probably thought she was winning. Poor thing had no idea she was actually digging her own grave, 1 permit violation at a time. I woke up to the sound of diesel engines at dawn, thinking maybe Tommy from the marina was making an early fuel delivery. Then I looked out my bedroom window and saw something that made me question whether I was still dreaming or having a nightmare. A construction barge the size of a small aircraft carrier was unloading excavators onto my beach. Yellow hardhats swarmed my property like locusts claiming a cornfield. By the time I pulled on jeans and grabbed coffee, they had 3 bulldozers operational and a concrete truck being ferried across on a second barge. The vibration from heavy machinery shook grandfather's hand-built cabin so hard that his antique clock fell off the mantel. Watching strangers tear up trees he'd planted as saplings felt like watching someone desecrate a cemetery. The foreman looked like he could wrestle bears for fun. His name tag read, Tank Morrison. Fitting, since he had the build of his namesake. But when he approached my dock, his manner was surprisingly gentle, almost apologetic. "Morning, sir. Tank Morrison, Pinnacle Construction. Real sorry about the early start, but we're on a tight schedule." He handed me a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. "Got all our permits in order. Should have this environmental cleanup wrapped up in a few months." Environmental cleanup? I scanned the paperwork while chainsaws murdered century-old pines behind us. Emergency soil remediation permit, petroleum contamination cleanup authorization, temporary worker housing construction agreement, all bearing official seals and signatures that looked legitimate enough to fool a federal judge. "What contamination?" I shouted over the mechanical symphony of destruction. Tank pulled out a soil analysis report thick as a phone book. "Says here you got serious petroleum contamination from an old underground tank, EPA priority site. We're building temporary housing for the cleanup crew, 38 units to handle the full remediation team." The taste of diesel exhaust mixing with my morning coffee turned my stomach. I'd never had an underground tank on this island. Hell, I'd never even had a gas-powered lawnmower here. But the environmental report looked scary official, complete with EPA letterhead and charts showing contamination levels that would make Chernobyl jealous. Here's the beautiful evil of a perfect lie. It contains just enough truth to pass the sniff test. Yes, there'd been a fuel spill at the marina 3 years ago, but that was 2 miles away and had nothing to do with my pristine island. "How long will this take?" I asked, watching my grandfather's favorite fishing spot disappear under a concrete foundation. "Couple months for the housing, then the environmental team moves in for the real work. Should have this place cleaned up and safe for your grandkids by spring." Tank genuinely believed he was saving the environment. His crew, faces I recognized from the hardware store and diner, chatted excitedly about steady paychecks through winter. Apparently the pay was generous enough to cover Christmas presents and maybe even Disney World for the kids. That's when Darlene's evil genius hit me like a sledgehammer. She wasn't just stealing my land, she was making my own neighbors accomplices in the theft. These weren't hired mercenaries, they were working fathers trying to provide for their families. Stopping construction would mean destroying dozens of local jobs right before Christmas. Fighting back would make me the Scrooge who stole Christmas from working families. Brilliant psychological warfare. I spent the morning documenting everything on my phone, feeling like a war correspondent in my own backyard. The acrid smell of concrete dust mixed with the sweet scent of fresh-cut pine as trucks rumbled across land my family had protected for nearly a century. By lunch, they'd poured the first cabin foundation where my grandfather's workshop used to stand. That evening, I called Miranda Cross with updates that felt like reading casualty reports. They're moving incredibly fast. Professional operation permits look bulletproof. Actually, that's fantastic news, she said, and I wondered if she'd lost her mind. Let me ask, did you study psychological warfare in the service? I had. Basic principle. Sometimes you let the enemy advance deep into territory they can't hold, then cut off their retreat. Every cabin they build without your consent creates evidence of conspiracy, Miranda explained. Every dollar they spend becomes money they'll owe you in damages. There's an old legal principle about willful trespass. When someone knowingly violates property rights, courts can award triple the actual damages. I did quick math while watching lights twinkle in the construction camp. 38 luxury cabins would cost $3 million minimum in materials and labor. Add Darlene's resort markup, and we're looking at $4 million total. Triple damages meant $12 million. Suddenly, letting them finish didn't seem insane. It seemed strategic. The smell of sawdust and diesel fuel drifted across dark water as I sat on my dock that night. Tank and his crew were probably exhausted but proud, thinking they'd done important environmental work. Poor bastards had no idea they were building the most expensive mistake in county history. The loons called across the lake, and tonight their voices sounded different. Tonight, they sounded like cash registers ringing up justice. 3 weeks into construction, Darlene decided to take her land grab public. And brother, when that woman launched a PR offensive, she made D-Day look like a church potluck. The Millbrook County Gazette, our sleepy local paper that usually covers high school football scores and whose cow got loose this week, suddenly ran a front-page feature that would make CNN jealous. Local environmental hero saves contaminated island. I nearly choked on my coffee reading it. According to their version, I was a difficult hermit blocking crucial environmental restoration that could save the entire lake ecosystem. They quoted Dr. Patricia Morrison, calling my resistance unconscionable environmental terrorism. Dr. Patricia Morrison? That's Tank's wife, who works as a dental hygienist at the strip mall clinic. But wait, it gets better. The article included glossy construction photos and testimonials from concerned citizens who turned out to be HOA board members using their middle names. My neighbor, Robert James Wilson, was actually Bob Wilson, Darlene's landscaper, expressing his deep concern for community health, environmental terrorism, for wanting to keep my own damn property. The Lakeside Estates Facebook page went nuclear with Save Our Lake propaganda. Before and after photos showed my abandoned wasteland magically transforming into an eco-friendly research facility. Comments poured in from profiles that all seemed birthed the same week, praising Darlene's selfless commitment to protecting our children's future. My personal favorite came from Sarah Green. As a mother of 3, I sleep better knowing brave people like Darlene are cleaning up dangerous contamination. Sarah's profile picture was obviously a stock photo soccer mom, and her only other posts were 5-star reviews of restaurants in cities that don't exist. The scary part? It worked. Local environmental groups started sharing the posts without fact-checking anything. The Sierra Club chapter president called Darlene a conservation hero. Even Mrs. Henderson, who'd brought my grandfather casseroles after his heart surgery, crossed the street to avoid me at the grocery store. Sitting in Mel's diner with fresh newsprint smell mixing with burnt coffee, I read the latest character assassination over eggs that tasted like cardboard. Every article made me sound like the Unabomber's environmentally destructive cousin, while Darlene came off as a cross between Mother Teresa and Captain Planet. The pressure escalated beyond digital warfare. Anonymous letters appeared in my mailbox. Threats disguised as neighborly advice from concerned community members. Someone slashed my truck tires twice in 1 week. My solar panels got pelted with paintballs that left them looking like abstract art. The dock ramp mysteriously developed a broken cable that nearly sent me swimming in 40-degree water. Local businesses joined the boycott faster than you could say economic terrorism. The hardware store was perpetually out of stock on anything I needed. The gas station had mysterious pump malfunctions whenever my truck appeared. Even the pizza place stopped delivering to my address. But here's where military intelligence training pays dividends. While Darlene played media games, I mapped her corruption network like a targeting analyst identifying enemy command structure. During my courthouse archaeology sessions, Mavis Smith quietly slipped me additional files that revealed the beautiful scope of this conspiracy. Judge Patricia Wellmont's Instagram was packed with photos from Pritchard yacht parties. Sheriff's deputy Randy Kowalski's son drew steady paychecks from Pinnacle Construction. Planning director Susan Weatherby had received campaign donations from 6 different Pritchard shell companies. The corruption web was vast, but corruption always leaves traces. Every favor, every covered-up inspection, every expedited permit created documentary evidence of criminal conspiracy. Late one October night, while reviewing surveillance footage of environmental destruction, I discovered something that made my tactical brain sing with possibility. Tank Morrison was secretly documenting the ecological damage with his personal phone. Photos of protected great blue heron nests being bulldozed. Video of rare trillium flowers disappearing under concrete pores. Time-stamped evidence of pristine springs getting contaminated with construction runoff. Tank was realizing he wasn't saving the environment. He was destroying it. The next morning, he approached my dock during coffee break, looking like a man carrying the weight of moral compromise. "Mr. Blackwood, can I ask you something straight up?" "Fire away." "Did you honestly ever have a fuel tank on this island? Any kind of petroleum storage at all?" The sound of nail guns echoed across water that sparkled with diesel fuel rainbows as I studied his weathered face. This was the moment I'd been strategically waiting for, the instant when conscience finally outweighed paycheck. "Tank, in 23 years of living here, the only petroleum on this island has been in my outboard motor, and I keep maintenance records going back to the Clinton administration." His shoulders sagged like structural supports giving way. "Jesus Christ, I was hoping you'd say something different." That evening, watching construction lights blaze across my stolen paradise, I realized Darlene's media victory was actually a strategic disaster. Her propaganda had created more enemies than allies. Tank's growing guilt would soon become active cooperation. And my evidence file was approaching weapons-grade completeness. The loons called across dark water, but tonight their voices carried a different message. Tonight, they sounded like they were announcing checkmate. You know how sometimes life hands you exactly what you need when you're convinced you're totally screwed? That happened while I was ransacking grandfather's filing cabinet at 2 a.m., looking for anything that might save my ass in court. I'd been through those files dozens of times, but desperation makes you creative. While hunting for original boundary surveys, my fingers found something that shouldn't exist. A seam in the cabinet's back panel that felt wrong. Hidden behind a false compartment wrapped in oilcloth like pirate treasure was a manila envelope thick as a Bible. The label, written in grandfather's careful script, read, "For Ezra, when the vultures finally circle." The crafty old bastard had been expecting this exact fight for decades. The first document made my coffee mug slip from numb fingers. Original 1923 mineral rights deed, filed separately from surface property. My worthless island sits on limestone deposits worth millions to construction companies. Grandfather had quietly secured those rights while letting everyone think he'd bought swampland for fishing. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was trust documentation that would make a Supreme Court justice weep with admiration. Silas Blackwood hadn't been some eccentric hermit. He'd been a retired railroad lawyer who'd spent decades watching corporations devour small property owners. So he'd built the legal equivalent of a nuclear bunker around our land. The trust included what lawyers call a reversion clause, basically a legal landmine with a 40-year timer. If anyone developed the property without written heir consent, ownership would automatically transfer to the state environmental agency. Every building, every improvement, every dollar invested would become government property faster than you could say eminent domain. No compensation, no appeals, no, oops, we made a mistake, just instant, total forfeiture. But grandfather wasn't done being brilliant. He'd included a treble damages provision that made my military tactician brain do happy dances. Any unauthorized construction subjected builders to paying 3 times project costs to the environmental trust. Current construction value, $4 million and climbing. Potential damages, $12 million. That's sell your yacht and mortgage your country club membership money. The trust also included spendthrift protections, meaning courts couldn't touch the settlement money, and a conservation provision directing everything to environmental protection if I died childless. Grandfather had weaponized greed itself for conservation. Reading these documents in his old rocking chair, surrounded by the smell of cedar and old leather, I finally understood why he'd always seemed amused by some private joke. He'd spent 40 years setting the perfect trap for someone exactly like Darlene. "Patience ain't passive, boy," he used to say while teaching me to tie fishing knots. "Patience is preparation." 40 years of preparation was about to pay dividends that would make Warren Buffett jealous. The next morning, I called Miranda Cross with updates that made her cackle like a witch discovering a cauldron full of gold. "Ezra, your grandfather created what we call a legal bear trap. The harder they struggle, the deeper the teeth sink. Every cabin they complete makes our case stronger and their losses bigger. How long do we let this continue? Until they're completely committed. Let them finish construction, sell units to innocent buyers, start counting profits. Make it impossible to claim this was innocent mistake or miscommunication." That afternoon, I visited grandfather's grave in the hilltop cemetery overlooking the lake. His headstone read simply, "Silas Blackwood, he thought ahead." Wind rustled through autumn maples as I studied that epitaph with new understanding. From the cemetery, I could see my island swarming with construction activity, 38 cabins rising where his century-old trees used to whisper secrets to the wind. Every nail driven, every foundation poured, every marketing brochure printed was building Darlene's financial funeral pyre. And she was paying for the matches. The sound of distant hammering echoed across water like a countdown timer ticking toward the most expensive lesson in property rights history. Grandfather always said the best revenge was letting your enemies hang themselves. Turns out he'd spent decades braiding the rope. November brought the kind of bone-deep cold that makes sensible people hibernate, but I had a war to plan. The kind of legal war that would make Darlene wish she'd stuck to terrorizing landscapers about lawn heights. I moved my command post to a mainland rental, partly for tactical advantage, mostly because watching strangers destroy grandfather's legacy every morning was giving me insomnia and an unhealthy desire to own a rocket launcher. Miranda Cross showed up with a briefcase that looked like it could survive nuclear winter and a smile that suggested she ate corporate lawyers for breakfast. She transformed my kitchen table into mission control, spreading legal documents until the place looked like Pentagon war room planning the invasion of Normandy. "Time to build a case that'll make federal prosecutors weep tears of joy," she announced, pulling out surveillance equipment that would shame the CIA. "Every environmental violation, every permit fraud, every criminal trespass gets documented with GPS precision and blockchain timestamps." The smell of fresh legal pads mixed with coffee strong enough to wake the dead as we planned systematic evidence gathering that would make military intelligence proud. I hired Cole Santos, a private investigator who looked like a mild-mannered accountant but hunted white-collar criminals like a bloodhound tracking escaped convicts. His preliminary research revealed financial connections more twisted than a pretzel factory explosion. "Your friend Darlene's been entrepreneurial," Cole explained, spreading organizational charts across my coffee table like he was mapping enemy positions. "Pristine Waters LLC connects to 17 shell companies across 3 states. Same playbook everywhere. Terrorize small property owners until they sell cheap." Installing the surveillance network felt like setting up a nature documentary, except instead of filming mating habits of rare birds, we were documenting criminal habits of corrupt officials. Professional-grade cameras hidden throughout the island, solar-powered and weatherproof. Motion sensors triggered recordings, GPS trackers monitored vehicle movements, underwater monitors documented environmental destruction. I felt like a one-man NSA operation, except my targets actually deserved what was coming. Tank Morrison became my unlikely deep throat during this phase. His conscience had been gnawing at him like termites in a wooden foundation since our dock conversation. One evening he called my burner phone with information that made my tactical brain sing opera. "Ezra, they brought in equipment today that ain't on any official manifest. Concrete trucks without DOT numbers, dump trucks with covered plates. Whatever they're dumping, it's not going through proper channels. Environmental crimes carry federal penalties that make armed robbery look like jaywalking. Every illegal disposal site became another felony count. Every contaminated water sample added years to potential sentences. My ally network expanded faster than gossip in a small town. Dr. Sarah Kim, the environmental group leader who'd been duped by Darlene's propaganda, realized she'd been played when independent water testing revealed petroleum contamination patterns completely wrong for historical spills. "I've studied this lake for 15 years, she confided during a clandestine library meeting that felt like Cold War espionage. "There's never been underground storage on your island. The contamination signatures match construction runoff, not historical fuel leaks." Mavis Smith continued her courthouse intelligence operations, quietly documenting permit irregularities and financial connections between Pritchard Enterprises and county officials. Every expedited approval, every skipped inspection, every suspicious campaign contribution created paper trails leading straight to conspiracy charges. Miranda explained federal racketeering laws using analogies that even my engineer brain could appreciate. Individual crimes are like bee stings, painful but survivable. But when you document coordinated stings from organized hives, that becomes RICO territory. Federal prosecutors love organized crime cases because they can seize everything. I learned about civil asset forfeiture, where government agencies could confiscate property used in criminal enterprises. Every Pritchard Company vehicle, every piece of construction equipment, every bank account funding fraudulent land grabs could become evidence subject to seizure. The numbers were intoxicating. Conservative estimates put Pritchard family assets north of $30 million. RICO convictions could trigger complete forfeiture, with proceeds funding victim compensation and environmental restoration. Thanksgiving week, while normal people planned turkey dinners, I finalized documentation for simultaneous state and federal prosecutions. Environmental crimes, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and racketeering charges across multiple jurisdictions. The evidence package filled 3 bankers' boxes with surveillance footage, financial records, environmental impact studies, and witness statements. Every document cross-referenced with GPS coordinates, timestamps, and chain of custody documentation that would satisfy the most paranoid federal prosecutor. During quiet moments, I'd walk down to the rental's small dock and listen to the sound of hammers and diesel engines echoing across dark water from my stolen island. Construction crews working overtime to finish their masterpiece before winter weather arrived. What they didn't know was that every nail driven, every foundation poured, every environmental law violated was building the most expensive legal mistake in county history. Grandfather used to say patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a weapon. After 40 years of preparation, his legal time bomb was finally ready to detonate, and Darlene Pritchard was standing directly over the blast radius, counting money that was about to become evidence in federal court. The loons called across cold November water, but tonight their voices sounded different. Tonight, they sounded like they were announcing showtime. December arrived with Darlene throwing a grand opening celebration that would make a Las Vegas casino blush with envy. She'd rebranded my stolen island as Eagles Rest Eco Resort, 38 luxury cabins marketed as the perfect marriage between environmental consciousness and rich people's comfort. The audacity was so breathtaking it deserved a standing ovation. My grandfather's wilderness had been transformed into something from a luxury magazine spread, rustic chic cabins with designer everything, private docks that cost more than most people's cars, stone fire pits positioned for optimal Instagram photos. I had to grudgingly admit, if you could ignore the whole grand theft property thing, the place looked absolutely stunning. The sales event drew potential buyers from half the state. Mercedes and BMWs lined the mainland parking like a German automotive convention. Women wearing coats that cost more than my truck mingled with men sporting watches worth more than college tuition. From my surveillance hide across the lake, I watched through binoculars as Darlene worked the crowd like a seasoned evangelist selling salvation. The smell of catered delicacies drifted across cold water, probably appetizers that cost more per bite than a fast food meal. Her marketing materials were masterpieces of creative writing. Sales brochures described Eagles Rest as a pioneering environmental restoration project converted to sustainable luxury community. The website claimed the island had been voluntarily donated for community stewardship after successful contamination remediation. Zero mention of property ownership disputes, ongoing federal investigations, or the fact that donated actually meant stolen in broad daylight. The first weekend sales numbers made my head spin. 18 cabins sold, ranging from $280,000 for nature view units to $450,000 for premium waterfront. Dr. Marcus Webb, who'd delivered half the babies in town, bought 2 cabins as college funds for his grandkids. Jane and Robert Foster, retired teachers who'd scrimped for 30 years, invested their entire pension in a lakefront dream cottage. Watching honest people hand over life savings for property that would soon become government evidence felt like watching lambs walk into slaughterhouse. These weren't predatory speculators. They were decent folks who trusted newspaper articles and official-looking permits. But here's where Darlene's greed created a beautiful mini twist that would make her lawyers weep. She got careless with success. Tank Morrison shared the inside scoop during one of our secret doc meetings. She's already talking Phase 2 expansion, wants to build a 100-slip marina and 5-star restaurant, got architects working overtime on plans. Phase 2 would require destroying protected wetlands and endangered bird habitat, environmental crimes carrying mandatory federal prison time. But more importantly, expansion plans proved this wasn't environmental restoration. This was commercial development disguised as conservation, which violated about 15 different federal statutes. Every expansion blueprint Tank smuggled to me became evidence of criminal intent spanning years into the future. Premeditated environmental destruction with detailed timelines and profit projections. The marketing campaign reached carnival levels of deception. Brochures featured testimonials from environmental scientists who turned out to be stock photo models. Website videos showed families enjoying sustainable lakefront living in settings that were actually filmed at resort properties in other states. My personal favorite was the fake wildlife biologist, Dr. Jennifer Greenwood, praising the habitat restoration. A reverse image search revealed Dr. Greenwood was actually a Danish fitness instructor named Svetlana, who'd probably never seen a lake that wasn't in a hotel spa. By Christmas, 31 cabins had sold for over $12 million. Money flowed through Bradford Pritchard's shell companies like water through a broken dam. Bank deposits large enough to trigger federal money laundering investigations happened weekly. The success party at Darlene's mansion reportedly featured champagne bottles that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her Instagram posts showed her toasting environmental progress while wearing enough jewelry to fund a small country's education budget. What she didn't realize was that every social media celebration, every sales contract, every bank deposit was being monitored by FBI financial crimes investigators who joined our party uninvited. Miranda Cross had quietly shared our evidence with federal authorities conducting parallel investigations across multiple states. Turns out the Pritchard model was part of a nationwide land fraud network. Exactly the kind of interstate criminal enterprise that makes federal prosecutors salivate like dogs hearing dinner bells. Late one snowy evening, while watching families move Christmas presents into cabins built on my stolen inheritance, the weight of approaching justice felt heavier than grandfather's old anvil. These innocent buyers would lose everything when property ownership reverted to legitimate authority. Their savings, their dreams, their faith in systems designed to protect honest people, all casualties of one woman's bottomless greed. But sometimes justice requires temporary pain to prevent permanent damage. Every defrauded family would receive full compensation from seized criminal assets. Every damaged ecosystem would be restored with forfeiture funds. Every corrupt official who enabled this theft would face federal prosecution. Snow continued falling outside my rental windows as I watched lights twinkle across the island where my grandfather used to teach me patience and planning. Tomorrow, his 40-year plan would finally reach its beautiful, devastating conclusion. Tonight, Darlene was still counting money that was about to become Exhibit A in federal court. January brought the kind of bitter cold that makes even Midwesterners question their life choices, but Darlene's desperation was running hotter than a forge. She'd caught wind that something wasn't right with her perfect crime, and her response was to double down on crazy like a gambler betting the house on snake eyes. The first sign of panic came when Tank Morrison called my burner phone at 3 a.m., voice shaking like he'd seen a ghost. "Ezra, they brought in a whole new crew today. Corporate security types in suits that cost more than my truck. They're asking questions about documentation, taking photos of everything." Darlene was conducting damage control, trying to eliminate evidence before someone connected enough dots to spell federal prison. But like most amateur criminals, she was creating more problems than she solved. Her intimidation campaign against my supporters escalated to Hollywood thriller levels. Mavis Smith suddenly found herself transferred to a basement office in the county's most remote building, processing dog licenses and septic permits. Dr. Sarah Kim faced a surprise audit of her environmental group's tax-exempt status. Even my rental property landlord got mysterious calls about zoning violations and insurance irregularities. The harassment felt personal and petty, like being attacked by a very wealthy, very vindictive middle schooler with too much power and not enough sense. My truck became a vandalism magnet. Tires slashed so many times I started buying them in bulk. Windows smashed with rocks that left notes reading "Leave Town" in kindergarten-level handwriting. Someone even poured sugar in my gas tank, apparently unaware that sugar doesn't actually damage engines, just makes mechanics laugh at your ignorance. The legal warfare intensified when the Pritchard family filed a restraining order claiming I was stalking Darlene and threatening construction workers. Judge Patricia Wellmont, Darlene's yacht party buddy, granted a temporary order without bothering to hear my side of the story. Suddenly, I was legally prohibited from approaching within 500 yards of my own damn island. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a chainsaw and serve it for dinner, but Darlene's desperation was creating exactly the evidence Miranda Cross needed for federal court. Every harassment incident, every false police report, every fraudulent restraining order became proof of criminal conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law. "She's panicking," Miranda explained during one of our clandestine meetings at a diner 3 counties away. "Criminals always make their biggest mistakes when they feel the walls closing in. Let her dig deeper. Every desperate move adds years to her eventual sentence." The community split was becoming a civil war fought with passive-aggressive weapons. Some residents began questioning the official story when independent environmental testing revealed contamination patterns that didn't match historical fuel spills. Others doubled down on supporting Darlene's version, either from genuine belief or fear of crossing the most powerful family in the county. Town council meetings turned into shouting matches between Save Our Lake supporters and property rights advocates. The local newspaper stopped covering the controversy after receiving threatening letters from Pritchard family lawyers. Even the post office became a battlefield when mail delivery to properties near the lake mysteriously became unreliable. But while Darlene fought public relations battles, I was building federal cases with Tank Morrison's increasingly valuable cooperation. His construction company phone captured recorded conversations proving that environmental permits were fabricated, soil tests were falsified, and protected wildlife habitats were deliberately destroyed. The smoking gun came when Tank's hidden camera recorded Darlene explicitly discussing plans to eliminate the hermit problem permanently. She suggested various scenarios ranging from financial destruction to unfortunate accidents that would remove me from the equation entirely. Conspiracy to commit bodily harm carries serious federal penalties, especially when combined with civil rights violations and organized criminal enterprise charges. Late one frozen January night, while reviewing surveillance footage of Darlene's security team searching my island for hidden cameras, I received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Special Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk." The federal cavalry had arrived, armed with subpoenas, search warrants, and decades of experience prosecuting organized crime networks. Agent Torres explained that our case had connected with investigations spanning multiple states, revealing property fraud schemes affecting hundreds of victims. "We're ready to move," she said during our meeting at an undisclosed government facility that smelled like coffee and justice. "But we need your cooperation for the final phase. Are you prepared to testify in federal court?" Looking at bankers' boxes filled with evidence that would destroy the Pritchard criminal empire, I thought about grandfather's patient planning and 40 years of preparation leading to this moment. "Agent Torres, I've been ready for this fight since I learned to tie my shoes. Let's finish what they started." Outside, snow fell steadily on the lake where my family's island had been stolen, developed, and sold to innocent victims who deserved better than being collateral damage in someone else's war. But tomorrow the war would finally end, and justice would be served colder than January wind across dark water. February 15th dawned gray and bitter, the kind of morning that makes you question whether spring will ever return. But inside the Millbrook County Courthouse, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation as spectators packed every available seat for what everyone expected to be a routine hearing. Darlene had filed an emergency motion for immediate property seizure to protect her buyers from my continued harassment and interference. Judge Patricia Wellmont presided with the confidence of someone who'd already decided the outcome before hearing evidence. I sat in the back row wearing my only suit, watching Darlene hold court like a queen addressing peasants. Her legal team, 3 lawyers in $1,000 suits, spread documents across tables like they were planning a military campaign. Local media representatives filled the press section, notebooks ready to document what they expected would be my final humiliation. The irony was delicious. Darlene had orchestrated this hearing to destroy me publicly, but she'd actually assembled the perfect audience for her own downfall. "Your Honor," began her lead attorney, "Mr. Blackwood's continued stalking and harassment threatens the safety of legitimate property owners who purchased homes in good faith. We request immediate restraining orders and emergency property seizure to protect innocent families." Judge Wellmont nodded sympathetically, clearly prepared to grant every request. "Mr. Blackwood, do you have representation?" That's when Miranda Cross stood up, followed by 3 federal prosecutors who'd been sitting quietly in the gallery. "Your Honor, Miranda Cross representing Mr. Blackwood. Before this proceeding continues, the court needs to address federal jurisdiction." The change in courtroom atmosphere was immediate and electric. Darlene's confident smile faltered like a television losing signal. "What federal jurisdiction?" Judge Wellmont asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected her comfortable world was about to implode. U.S. Attorney James Harrison approached the bench carrying documents that would make constitutional lawyers weep with admiration. "Your Honor, this court lacks jurisdiction due to pending federal charges under RICO statutes. I'm filing criminal complaints against Mrs. Pritchard, her husband, and 17 co-conspirators for organized property fraud, environmental crimes, civil rights violations, and criminal conspiracy." The courtroom erupted like a volcano. Spectators gasped, reporters frantically scribbled notes, and Darlene's lawyers huddled like football players whose star quarterback just got ejected. But the real fireworks started when U.S. Attorney Harrison called for the reading of grandfather's original trust documents. The court clerk's voice carried across stunned silence as she read aloud the reversion clause that would transfer ownership to the state environmental agency. "Furthermore," the clerk continued, "any unauthorized development subjects the builders to treble damages totaling—" She paused to double-check the mathematics. $14.7 million. Darlene's face went through more color changes than a mood ring in a blender. White to red to green to a shade of pale that suggested someone had opened her coffin prematurely. The innocent cabin buyers, Dr. Webb, the foster couple, and dozens of families, realized simultaneously that their life savings had evaporated like morning mist. The sound of whispered conversations and suppressed sobs filled the courtroom as the scope of the fraud became clear. Tank Morrison, who'd been waiting in the hallway, entered to provide testimony that would end several careers. His construction company's hidden recordings played through the courthouse sound system, broadcasting Darlene's voice discussing bribes, environmental cover-ups, and plans to eliminate the hermit problem permanently. Judge Wellmont attempted to maintain control, but her authority crumbled when federal marshals presented arrest warrants. Her own yacht party photos with the Pritchard family were projected on courtroom screens as evidence of judicial corruption. The media explosion was instantaneous. Regional news crews broadcast live coverage as Darlene was led away in handcuffs, her perfect blonde hair finally disheveled, designer handbag replaced with standard-issue restraints. Social media videos went viral within hours, showing the downfall of a woman who'd terrorized property owners across 3 counties. But the moment that would be remembered forever came when I finally addressed the court. Microphones captured every word as I looked directly at Darlene and delivered the line that would be quoted in legal textbooks for decades. "Your Honor, my grandfather taught me that patience isn't passive, it's preparation. Some people build houses on sand. Mrs. Pritchard built her criminal empire on my family's foundation, and foundations have a way of reclaiming what belongs to them." The gavel's final bang echoed through the courthouse as federal authorities took control of the proceeding. Bradford Pritchard was arrested at his office, various county officials were read their rights, and the Pritchard criminal empire collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Outside, snow continued falling on Eagles Rest Lake, but for the first time in months, the sound carried notes of justice instead of diesel engines. Grandfather's 40-year trap had finally snapped shut, and the people who'd stolen our family's legacy were about to learn that some debts can only be paid in federal prison time. The loons would be calling across peaceful water again soon. 6 months later, Eagles Rest Lake sparkled in autumn sunshine like a jewel that had been polished back to its original brilliance. The transformation was so complete that visitors could barely believe the pristine wilderness had ever been scarred by criminal greed. Justice came swift and merciless for the Pritchard criminal empire. Darlene received 4 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, and civil rights violations, though she'll probably serve less time than it took her to destroy my family's peace. Bradford got 18 months for conspiracy and money laundering, plus forfeiture of $12 million in assets that would fund victim compensation and environmental restoration. Judge Patricia Wellmont resigned in disgrace before ethics investigators could formally remove her. Deputy Randy Kowalski lost his badge and faced criminal charges for accepting bribes. Even planning director Susan Weatherby found herself unemployed and under federal investigation. The innocent cabin buyers received full compensation from seized Pritchard assets, plus legal fees and relocation expenses. Dr. Webb used his settlement to establish a scholarship fund for local students pursuing environmental science. The Foster couple bought a legitimate lakefront property on the mainland and sent me a Christmas card thanking me for saving them from a nightmare disguised as a dream. Tank Morrison became construction manager for the Eagles Rest Environmental Preserve, overseeing the conversion of 38 luxury cabins into a world-class research station and educational facility. His crew, who'd unknowingly participated in environmental crimes, now takes pride in restoration work that actually helps wildlife instead of destroying it. The preserve itself exceeds even grandfather's wildest conservation dreams. Protected wetlands have been restored using Pritchard forfeiture funds. Rare bird species are returning to nesting sites that were nearly destroyed by development. Scientists from 3 universities conduct research on island ecosystems that will inform conservation efforts across the Great Lakes region. I moved back to grandfather's cabin, which survived the chaos with typical stubborn durability. The old rocking chair still sits on the porch where he used to plan strategies and watch sunset paint the water gold. Sometimes I sit there evening with legal documents that establish the Silas Blackwood Conservation Foundation, reading his handwritten notes and margins that prove he anticipated this victory decades before it happened. The foundation supports property rights legal clinics across the region, helping small landowners fight bureaucratic harassment and corporate intimidation. Miranda Cross runs the program, providing free legal representation for families facing the kind of systematic abuse we experienced. We've already prevented 6 similar schemes in neighboring counties, using surveillance techniques and legal strategies proven effective against the Pritchard empire. Word spreads quickly in criminal circles when law enforcement successfully prosecutes organized property fraud. Other predators learn to find easier targets. Eagles Rest. Heritage Festival happens every summer now, celebrating conservation victory while educating visitors about property rights and environmental protection. Tank's construction expertise helps maintain research facilities while teaching local youth traditional building skills. The festival raises funds for the Silas Blackwood Engineering Scholarship, supporting rural students pursuing careers in environmental engineering and land use planning. This year's festival featured something special, a dedication ceremony for the grandfather Silas Memorial Dock, built exactly where the original stood before Darlene's crew demolished it. The new structure incorporates salvaged timber from the illegal cabins, turning symbols of criminal greed into lasting monuments to patient justice. Dr. Sarah Kim serves on the State Environmental Oversight Board now, ensuring that legitimate development projects undergo proper review while preventing fraudulent schemes disguised as environmental restoration. Mavis Smith was promoted to County Records Director, implementing transparency requirements that make future corruption much more difficult. But the best part happens every morning when I walk down to the dock with coffee that tastes like freedom. The loons call across water that runs clean again, their voices carrying messages of patience rewarded and justice served. Grandfather's century-old pine trees whisper secrets to wind that carries the scent of wildflowers instead of diesel exhaust. Sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate, it's inevitable.